Have you ever found yourself staring at a car so hideous or catastrophically unreliable that you wondered, who thought this was a good idea? Or maybe you've heard legendary tales of vehicles so flawed they became infamous for all the wrong reasons. The history of American automobiles is packed with groundbreaking innovations, but also some absolute disasters. From engineering nightmares to design blunders that defy logic, these aren't just bad cars. They're rolling reminders of what not to do. Buckle up as we count down the top 20 worst cars in US history. AMC Gremlin. The AMC Gremlin, produced between 1970 and 1978, is proof that desperation and creativity don't always mix well. Designed as a quick response to the rising demand for compact cars, AMC essentially took a regular Hornet, chopped off the back, and called it a day. The result? A car that looked permanently unfinished, as if the designers gave up halfway through. Beyond its oddball appearance, the Gremlin was plagued with issues. Its build quality was laughable, with cheap materials and panel gaps that you could lose a finger in. The ride was rough, the handling was clunky, and early models suffered from underpowered engines, unless you opted for the gas-guzzling V8, which defeated the whole purpose of a compact car. Reliability? Let's just say Gremlin owners got very familiar with their local mechanics. Electrical problems, rust, and failing components were common. It also lacked modern safety features, making it a risky ride. Despite these flaws, the Gremlin did develop a cult following, mostly because it was so bizarre. But in the grand scheme of automotive history, it stands as a cautionary tale of what happens when you rush a car to market without thinking it through. A Gremlin, indeed. Chevrolet Corvair. The Chevrolet Corvair is one of the most infamous cars in American history, not because it was ugly or underpowered, but because it was dangerous. At first glance, the Corvair seemed like a revolutionary idea, a stylish, air-cooled rear-engine car meant to take on European imports. But under the sleek exterior lurked a fatal flaw. Its rear suspension design made it prone to catastrophic oversteer, causing the rear end to swing out uncontrollably in corners. Worse yet, Chevy originally left off a front stabilizer bar to cut costs, making the problem even more pronounced. Then came Ralph Nader's 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed, which slammed the Corvair's handling, branding it a death trap. The damage was done, sales tanked, lawsuits piled up, and Chevy was forced to redesign the suspension. Though later models were much improved, the Corvair's reputation was already beyond repair. Ironically, later safety tests suggested the Corvair wasn't uniquely dangerous, but by then, it was too late. The Corvair became a symbol of corporate negligence, proving that cutting corners on safety could have disastrous consequences. Today, it remains a cautionary tale. A car that could have been great if only Chevrolet had gotten it right the first time. Chrysler PT Cruiser. The Chrysler PT Cruiser is one of the most infamous automotive blunders in American history. A car that looked like a retro fever dream but drove like a bad decision. Launched in 2000, Chrysler gambled on nostalgic styling, hoping to capture the hearts of drivers craving something different. Instead, they delivered a cramped, underpowered, and cheaply built disaster that aged like spoiled milk. Under the hood, the PT Cruiser offered lethargic four-cylinder engines that made acceleration feel like a chore. Its sloppy handling and outdated four-speed automatic transmission only made things worse. Inside, cheap plastics and questionable ergonomics made it clear that Chrysler had cut corners wherever possible. And then there's the design, a love it or hate it aesthetic that quickly fell out of favor. What started as a quirky novelty soon became a rolling punchline, cluttering used car lots across America. Even worse, its resale value plummeted, making it a regrettable purchase for many unlucky owners. By the time Chrysler pulled the plug in 2010, the PT Cruiser had become the poster child for automotive misfires. Today, it is remembered as a car that tried too hard to be different, but ended up being all the wrong reasons one would ever need a car. Dodge Caliber. The Dodge Caliber is the automotive equivalent of a broken promise, one that lured buyers in with rugged looks and a low price, only to disappoint at every turn. Marketed as a bold, edgy hatchback with SUV-like styling, the Caliber was anything but. Under the hood, it offered lethargic engines paired with one of the worst CVT transmissions ever put in a car, resulting in sluggish acceleration and a droning, soul-sucking driving experience. Step inside, and things got even worse. The interior felt like it was made from recycled fast food trays, cheap, brittle plastic everywhere. The seats, uncomfortable. The tech, already outdated when it launched. Even Chrysler's attempt at a gimmick, an in-dash cooler, couldn't distract from the Caliber's many flaws. Reliability was another disaster. Owners reported constant issues, from transmission failures to electrical gremlins, making the Caliber an expensive headache long after purchase. By the time Dodge mercifully killed it off in 2012, it had cemented its reputation as one of the worst cars of its era. If disappointment had four wheels, it would be called the Dodge Caliber, a car that proved looks can be deceiving, but bad engineering never lies. Jeep Compass. The Jeep Compass is proof that even legendary brands can get lost on the road to success. Jeep, known for its rugged off-road beast, somehow built a compact SUV that was so underwhelming that it became a rolling disappointment. The first-generation Compass was a cheap, plasticky mess, lacking the toughness and capability expected from a Jeep. Instead of conquering trails, it struggled to conquer a speed bump. The 2.4-liter four-cylinder engine wheezed like a chain smoker climbing stairs, paired with a dreadful, continuously variable transmission that sucked the joy out of driving. Acceleration was sluggish, handling was vague, and the ride was anything but refined. Inside, the interior felt like it was made from recycled Happy Meal toys, with flimsy materials and laughably poor fit and finish. To make matters worse, this so-called Jeep had the off-road capability of a grocery cart. Unlike its legendary siblings, the Compass was front-wheel drive by default, with an optional all-wheel drive system that was about as useful as training wheels on a mountain bike. With zero personality, gutless performance, and bargain bin quality, the Jeep Compass wasn't just bad, it was an insult to the Jeep name. It's no surprise that it quickly became one of the most ridiculed SUVs of its time. Lincoln Blackwood. The Lincoln Blackwood was supposed to be the pinnacle of luxury pickups, a bold attempt to blend rugged utility with high-end refinement. Instead, it became a laughable disaster that crashed and burned after just 1 year on the market. At first glance, the Blackwood looked flashy, with its glossy, fake wood grain bed panels that made it resemble a rolling executive office desk. But that bed? Completely useless. It was lined with carpeting, sealed shut, and could barely carry anything. Imagine buying a truck and realizing it's allergic to work. Under the hood, it had the same 5.4-liter V8 as the Ford F-150, but Lincoln refused to offer four-wheel drive, because apparently their ideal buyer wanted a truck that couldn't handle mud, snow, or anything remotely rugged. The interior was plush, but at $52,000, nobody wanted to pay Cadillac Escalade money for an F-150 dressed in a tuxedo. Ford learned its lesson fast, killing the Blackwood after just 3,356 units were sold. Today, it's remembered as a glorious failure, proof that not every luxury brand should make a pickup, and that a truck without utility is just an overpriced pavement princess. Chevrolet Citation. The Chevrolet Citation was supposed to be the future of American compact cars, innovative, efficient, and modern. Instead, it became a rolling disaster that left a trail of disappointed owners and frustrated mechanics. GM's first front-wheel drive compact, the Citation, was rushed to market, and it showed. On paper, it seemed promising, lightweight, fuel-efficient, and offering a surprising amount of interior space. But in reality, the Citation was plagued with horrible reliability issues, shoddy build quality, and handling so unpredictable it could make a roller coaster feel tame. Brakes locked up unpredictably, transmissions failed prematurely, and rust ate through its flimsy body like termites on old wood. And let's talk about that notorious X-body chassis, GM's brilliant idea that turned out to be a nightmare. The Citation's torque steer was so bad that accelerating felt like a battle between you and the steering wheel. Lawsuits and recalls piled up as customers realized their cutting-edge compact was dangerous, cheaply made, and falling apart way too soon. Instead of revolutionizing American cars, the Citation became a symbol of corporate greed and rushed engineering cementing its place as one of the worst cars in US history. Suzuki X90. The Suzuki X90 proves that just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. Released in the mid-90s, this bizarre two-seater tried to combine the ruggedness of an SUV with the quirkiness of a sports coupe, and failed spectacularly at both. Looking like a toy car someone accidentally scaled up to real life, the X90 was neither practical nor powerful, boasting a measly 95 horsepower engine that struggled to move its awkward frame. Its cramped interior made it useless as a functional off-roader, and despite its small size, it was surprisingly unstable. Thanks to its high center of gravity, it felt more like a rolling safety hazard than a fun little SUV. To make matters worse, Suzuki thought T-top removable roof panels would make it extraordinary. Spoiler, they didn't. Drivers hated it, critics mocked it, and even rental companies didn't want it. The only people who seemed interested were Red Bull, which famously turned them into promotional vehicles with giant cans strapped to the roof. Suzuki pulled the plug after just 2 years, and today, the X90 is mostly remembered as a cautionary tale of what happens when automakers try way too hard to be different. Mercury Bobcat. The Mercury Bobcat is the forgotten twin of the infamous Ford Pinto, but make no mistake, it was just as much of a disaster. Marketed as a more luxurious version of the Pinto, the Bobcat was nothing more than a glorified ticking time bomb. Literally. Like the Pinto, the Bobcat had a deadly design flaw, a poorly placed fuel tank that could explode in a rear-end collision. And because Mercury was supposed to be a premium brand, buyers paid extra for the privilege of driving a car that could turn into a fireball on impact. Classy, right? But the Bobcat's problems didn't stop at its potential for spontaneous combustion. Under the hood, it was woefully underpowered, with an anemic engine that struggled to get out of its own way. The build quality? Laughable. Cheap materials, flimsy construction, and rust issues meant the Bobcat aged poorly, if it even lasted that long. While the Pinto gets the most hate, the Bobcat deserves just as much scorn. It was a dangerous, sluggish, and pointless attempt at making a bad car slightly fancier. In the end, the only thing luxurious about the Bobcat was the relief of never having to drive one. Hyundai Excel. In the late 1980s, Hyundai entered the US market with the Excel, a budget-friendly compact that promised affordability but delivered misery on wheels. At first, buyers were lured in by its rock-bottom price and flashy marketing, but it didn't take long for the nightmare to begin. The Excel was plagued with horrific reliability issues. Its engine struggled to make it past 50,000 miles without falling apart, while the transmission seemed allergic to shifting properly. The car's thin, cheap metal panels rusted faster than an abandoned shopping cart, and the interior plastics cracked under a mean glance from the sun. Driving one felt like a punishment. The underpowered engine wheezed like an asthmatic hamster, and the suspension was so soft that cornering at normal speeds felt like piloting a rowboat in a hurricane. Then came the electrical failures, broken door handles, and engines that would rather die than start on a cold morning. By the mid-90s, Excel's reputation was in freefall, and Hyundai had to fight tooth and nail to rebuild consumer trust. Though the brand has since redeemed itself, Excel remains a legendary disaster, proving that sometimes cheap comes at a painfully high cost. Chevrolet SSR. The Chevrolet SSR is what happens when a midlife crisis meets bad engineering. On paper, it seemed like a fun idea, a retro-styled convertible pickup truck with muscle car DNA. In reality, it was a bizarre identity crisis on wheels. First, let's talk about the design. Chevy tried to blend hot rod, truck, and roadster, but the result was a cartoonish mess that looked like a car Batman's uncle might drive. It had bulky fenders, a retractable hardtop, and a tiny truck bed that was about as useful as a handbag. And despite its aggressive stance, the SSR was anything but fast. The early models came with a lethargic 5.3-liter V8 producing just 300 horsepower, paired with a clunky 4-speed automatic. Even the later 6.0-liter V8 upgrade couldn't save it from feeling heavy, sluggish, and disappointing to drive. And then there was the price, over $40,000 for a vehicle that had no real purpose. It wasn't a good truck, it wasn't a great sports car, and it sure wasn't practical. Chevrolet bet on nostalgia, but all they got was one of the biggest flops in automotive history. Today, the SSR is a punchline, an awkward relic of an era that tried way too hard. Dodge Nitro. The Dodge Nitro is proof that bad ideas sometimes make it all the way to production. At first glance, it looked tough, boxy, aggressive, and ready to dominate the road. But the moment you got behind the wheel, the illusion shattered. This SUV was heavy, sluggish, and about as refined as a brick on wheels. Thanks to its stiff suspension and awkward steering, its handling felt more like a wrestling match than a driving experience. Under the hood, things weren't much better. The Nitro's engines were underpowered for their weight, making acceleration a chore. And let's not forget the laughably bad fuel economy, which made you feel like you were personally funding an oil company. Inside, cheap plastics, outdated tech, and a lack of comfort made long drives feel like a punishment. Reliability? Forget about it. Electrical gremlins, transmission failures, and a host of mechanical issues plagued owners. The Nitro promised rugged capability but delivered a frustrating, uncomfortable, and inefficient mess. It was an SUV that looked the part but never played it well, earning its place among the worst cars in American history. If there was ever a vehicle that deserved to be forgotten, the Dodge Nitro is it. Plymouth Prowler. The Plymouth Prowler had all the makings of a legend, except for one fatal flaw: it had no muscle to back up its hot rod looks. Chrysler hyped it as a modern-day street rod with wild retro styling, open front wheels, and an aggressive stance. But once you turned the key, reality hit hard. Under the hood was a measly 3.5-liter V6 producing just 214 horsepower, later bumped to 253 horsepower paired with an automatic transmission because Chrysler, in all its wisdom, didn't think a manual belonged in a hot rod. Drivers expecting raw, tire-shredding power were instead met with a minivan engine and a sluggish 0 to 60 miles per hour time of around 7 seconds. Worse, its aluminum body and rear-wheel drive made it impractical, and the lack of trunk space meant you could barely fit a grocery bag, let alone a spare ego. The Prowler was all show and no go, a car that looked ready to tear up the streets but couldn't outrun a well-driven Camry. Plymouth's flashy experiment ended in embarrassment, proving that cool styling can't save a bad car. Today, the Prowler is remembered as one of the biggest letdowns in American automotive history. Cadillac Allante. The Cadillac Allante was supposed to be America's answer to European luxury roadsters, a sleek, high-end convertible that could take on the likes of Mercedes-Benz. Instead, it became a $60,000 engineering disaster that Cadillac would rather forget. At first glance, the Allante had all the makings of a winner: a body designed by Pininfarina, the same firm behind Ferrari, a powerful V8 engine, and Cadillac's signature comfort. But under the hood, literally and figuratively, things fell apart. Cadillac's ambitious plan to have the bodies hand-built in Italy and then flown to Detroit for assembly using 747 cargo planes led to sky-high production costs and questionable quality control. The result? Panel misalignments, electrical failures, and an unrefined driving experience that felt more like a clunky Oldsmobile than a world-class Grand Tourer. To make matters worse, the Allante's front-wheel drive layout, a rarity for luxury roadsters, made handling awkward, and its so-called powerful engine wasn't nearly as fast as its European rivals. By the time Cadillac fixed some of the issues in 1993, it was too late. Sales were abysmal, and the Allante was quietly put out of its misery. A luxury car that couldn't compete in luxury? That's a Cadillac-sized failure. Ford Thunderbird. The 2002 to 2005 Ford Thunderbird was supposed to be a glorious revival of a classic, but instead, it became one of the most disappointing flops in American automotive history. Ford promised a sleek, retro-styled roadster that would capture the spirit of the legendary 1955 Thunderbird. What they delivered was a bland, underwhelming, and overpriced two-seater that left enthusiasts shaking their heads. Under the hood, the T-Bird packed a 3.9-liter V8, but with just 280 horsepower, it felt sluggish, especially when paired with a lazy 5-speed automatic transmission. Handling was boat-like, the steering was numb, and the ride quality was uninspiring. It looked like a car built for fun, but behind the wheel, it was anything but. And let's talk about the styling. While Ford tried to channel nostalgia, the end result looked more like a bloated bathtub on wheels. It lacked the aggressive stance of its predecessors, making it more of a midlife crisis cruiser than a serious sports car. To top it off, a high price tag and cheap interior materials ensured that sales flopped. The Thunderbird name once stood for style and performance. The 2002 reboot? A forgettable embarrassment that faded into obscurity almost as quickly as it arrived. Chrysler TC by Maserati. The Chrysler TC by Maserati was supposed to be a luxury grand tourer blending Italian elegance with American muscle. Instead, it became a laughable disaster, a car that no one asked for and even fewer wanted. Chrysler hyped it as a high-end roadster to rival the Mercedes SL and Cadillac Alante, but what they delivered was a Frankenstein's monster of mediocrity. First, the design. Despite its Maserati badge, it looked nearly identical to a Chrysler LeBaron, except it cost twice as much. The promise of exotic Italian craftsmanship, more like a Chrysler Parts Bin Special, with only a handful of Maserati touches. Then the performance, a so-called luxury car that offered a wheezing 4-cylinder engine as the base option. Even the available V6 barely pushed out 200 horsepower. It was slow, uninspiring, and drove like a grandpa's Sunday cruiser, not a sleek European masterpiece. The worst part? Chrysler spent nearly a decade developing this flop only to sell fewer than 7,500 units before mercifully pulling the plug in 1991. Today, the TC by Maserati is remembered as a spectacular failure, proving that slapping a fancy name on a bad car doesn't make it good, it just makes it more embarrassing. Hummer H2. The Hummer H2 wasn't just a bad car, it was an over-the-top, gas-guzzling monstrosity that perfectly embodied early 2000s excess. While it tried to cash in on the rugged military-inspired image of the original Hummer H1, the H2 was nothing more than a bloated suburban status symbol with terrible practicality, laughable fuel efficiency, and underwhelming performance. At nearly 6,400 pounds, this beast was built like a tank. But unfortunately, it didn't drive like one. It had a gutless V8, struggled with acceleration, and handled like a school bus on roller skates. It guzzled gas at an abysmal 9 to 10 miles per gallon, making it one of the most inefficient vehicles on the road. Parking? Forget about it. The H2 was so absurdly large that it barely fit in standard spaces, much to the frustration of everyone around it. Despite its rugged looks, the H2 was shockingly bad off-road, with a high center of gravity that made it prone to tipping over. And let's not forget the price. Owners paid luxury-level money for cheap plastic interiors and poor build quality. The Hummer H2 wasn't just bad, it was an automotive punchline, a rolling reminder that bigger doesn't always mean better. Buick Reatta. The Buick Reatta was supposed to be a sleek, hand-built luxury coupe that redefined Buick's image. Instead, it became an overpriced, underpowered embarrassment that no one wanted. Marketed as a high-end, personal luxury car, the Reatta was Buick's attempt to compete with European grand tourers. But there was just one problem. Actually, there were a lot of problems. First, the performance was a joke. For a car that looked sporty, it had all the excitement of a lawnmower. With a sluggish 3.8-liter V6 pushing out a measly 165 horsepower, the Reatta wasn't just slow, it was painfully disappointing. 0 to 60 miles per hour? It took a sluggish 10 seconds while its rivals were leaving it in the dust. Then there was the technology overkill. Buick thought a touchscreen dashboard in the late 80s was futuristic. Instead, it was unresponsive, unreliable, and expensive to fix. Basically, the worst of both worlds. And let's not forget the price tag. Buick wanted over $30,000 for this dud, which was BMW and Mercedes money at the time. Buyers took one look and ran the other way. By 1991, Buick pulled the plug and the Reatta faded into obscurity, a failed experiment in overpriced mediocrity. Dodge Omni. The Dodge Omni had all the makings of a game changer, a front-wheel drive, fuel-efficient hatchback meant to compete with European imports. Instead, it became one of Chrysler's most embarrassing failures. At first glance, the Omni seemed like a practical little car, but once you got behind the wheel, reality hit hard. Its anemic four-cylinder engine struggled to produce enough power to get out of its own way, and the driving experience felt more like piloting a wobbly shopping cart than a car. Then came the reliability nightmares. From faulty carburetors to electrical gremlins, the Omni was a rolling headache. Owners reported stalling, misfiring, and random breakdowns, often within months of purchase. Rust was another major issue. The car could seemingly corrode overnight, as if Chrysler had forgotten to include paint protection. And let's not forget the infamous runaway acceleration defect where the throttle would stick, turning an already terrible car into an unpredictable death trap. Despite its early sales success, the Omni's reputation plummeted as word spread about its cheap build quality and mechanical failures. By the time Chrysler put it out of its misery in 1990, the Omni had secured its place in history, not as a game changer, but as a cautionary tale. Pontiac Sunfire. The Pontiac Sunfire, produced from 1995 to 2005, has earned a notorious reputation as one of the worst cars in American history. Why? Because it perfectly embodies the era of cheap, uninspired, and downright unreliable automobiles. First, its design screamed 1990s rental car, with plastic-heavy interiors, low-quality materials, and a dashboard that looked like it was molded from a melted lunch tray. Performance, laughable. The base engine wheezed out a meager 115 horsepower, barely enough to outrun a shopping cart with a wobbly wheel. And don't even get started on handling. Steering was vague, the suspension was bouncy, and driving it felt more like a punishment than a privilege. But the real horror story, reliability. The Sunfire was plagued with electrical issues, head gasket failures, and transmissions that self-destructed at the worst possible moments. Owners often found themselves on a first-name basis with their local mechanic. GM clearly built the Sunfire as an afterthought, a car destined for high school parking lots and used car nightmares. It wasn't just bad, it was the kind of bad that made people swear off Pontiacs forever. No wonder the brand didn't survive much longer. So there you go, did you ever experience any of these cars? Let us know in the comment section below.
The 1980s, what a time to be alive. Big hair, bold fashion statements, and some of the most awesomely terrible cars ever to hit the road. I'm talking real clunkers, folks. Cars so bad, they're almost good. Almost. You're about to see the 10 worst cars of the 80s that failed and nobody wants to remember. Reliant Robin. The Reliant Robin, with its quirky three-wheel design, was a true 80s oddball, but beneath its comical appearance lurked some serious safety concerns. This fiberglass-bodied car had a pesky habit of tipping over at the slightest provocation, making even a leisurely Sunday drive feel like a high-stakes adventure. Its lightweight construction may have been great for fuel economy, but it left the Robin vulnerable to all sorts of bumps and bruises. And let's not forget the infamous Top Gear segment where Jeremy Clarkson put the Robin stability to the test, with hilariously disastrous results. As he so eloquently put it, driving it was as dangerous as inviting your mum round for an evening on chat roulette. But despite its flaws, the Reliant Robin remains a beloved icon of the 80s. Its quirky charm and plucky spirit make it impossible to forget, even if it did have a tendency to roll over at inopportune moments. Love it or hate it, the Robin was definitely one of a kind. Speaking of one of a kind cars, the Aston Martin Lagonda was another 80s standout, but for very different reasons. Aston Martin Lagonda. The Aston Martin Lagonda, on the other hand, was the epitome of 80s luxury gone wrong. This sleek, futuristic sedan boasted cutting-edge technology, like a digital dashboard straight out of a sci-fi flick. But beneath its stylish exterior lurked a host of problems that would make even the most diehard Aston Martin fan think twice. For starters, the Lagonda's electronics were about as reliable as a politician's promise. Owners often found themselves stranded on the side of the road, cursing the very gadgets that were supposed to make their lives easier. And if you thought the electronics were bad, just wait until you hear about the fuel consumption. The Lagonda guzzled gas like it was going out of style, which was a real problem considering the oil crisis of the 70s. Filling up the tank was like taking out a second mortgage, and the measly 8 miles per gallon made even the most gas-guzzling SUVs look like eco-friendly hybrids. But perhaps the biggest issue with the Lagonda was its astronomical price tag at 20,000 pounds, about $200,000 in today's money. It was a car reserved for the wealthy elite. And what did they get for their hard-earned cash? A car that spent more time in the shop than on the road. Despite its futuristic design and luxurious status, the Lagonda was a prime example of how even the most prestigious brands can miss the mark. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when style trumps substance, and a reminder that even the most advanced technology is useless if it doesn't work. But the Lagonda wasn't the only 80s car to fall short of expectations. Another notorious example was the Yugo GV, a tiny hatchback that promised big things but delivered nothing but headaches. The Yugo GV was a veritable poster child for automotive mediocrity in the 1980s. This pint-sized hatchback, hailing from the former Yugoslavia, quickly earned a reputation as one of the most notorious lemons to ever grace the roads. Its shoddy build quality and propensity for breakdowns made it the butt of countless jokes and cemented its status as a symbol of inefficiency. Owners of the ill-fated Yugo often found themselves stranded on the side of the road, cursing the day they ever laid eyes on this mechanical monstrosity. The car's flimsy construction left it vulnerable to all manner of malfunctions, from faulty electrical systems to engines that sputtered and stalled at the most inopportune moments. It was as if the Yugo had a personal vendetta against its drivers, determined to make their lives as miserable as possible. But the Yugo's infamy wasn't limited to its underwhelming performance. Its very name became synonymous with failure and disappointment, spawning a litany of derisive quips. As one popular joke went, "What do you call a Yugo with a flat tire? Totaled." Another zinger suggested that the best way to double a Yugo's value was simply to fill up its gas tank. Yet despite its well-earned reputation as a lemon, the Yugo GV remains an unforgettable part of automotive history. Its legacy as a cautionary tale of shoddy craftsmanship and poor design endures to this day, reminding us that sometimes the most memorable cars are the ones we'd rather forget. But the Yugo wasn't the only 80s car to leave drivers scratching their heads in bewilderment. Another head-scratcher was the Subaru Brat, a peculiar pickup truck with a few surprises up its sleeve. Subaru's quirky little pickup, the Brat, was a head-turner for all the wrong reasons. This oddball truck boasted a pair of rear-facing plastic jump seats welded right into the cargo bed. Sure, they helped Subaru skirt around those pesky import tariffs by classifying the Brat as a passenger car, but at what cost? These jump seats were about as practical as a screen door on a submarine. Imagine trying to cram your friends back there, watching them hold on for dear life as you hit every bump and pothole. It's no wonder the seats were ditched after the 85 model year, but the Brat's flaws didn't stop there. While it tried to blend the versatility of a small truck with the nimbleness of a car, it ended up falling short on both fronts. The impractical design and overall quirkiness led to a lukewarm reception from buyers. Despite its shortcomings, the Brat managed to stick around in various export markets until 1994, a testament to its niche appeal. But for most folks, this peculiar pickup was just too far off the beaten path. Speaking of cars that missed the mark, let's shift gears and take a closer look at another 80s misfit, the Pontiac Fiero. The Pontiac Fiero, a mid-engine sports car with plastic body panels, seemed like a radical departure from the norm, but beneath its sleek exterior, the Fiero was plagued by a host of issues that quickly tarnished its reputation. Early models were saddled with anemic engines, like the Iron Duke 4-cylinder, that struggled to break the 100 horsepower barrier. This lackluster performance left many drivers feeling let down, especially given the Fiero's sporty appearance. To make matters worse, the Fiero gained notoriety for its tendency to burst into flames, a safety hazard that sent shockwaves through the automotive world. The car's cobbled together design, which borrowed parts from other GM models not intended for a sports car, resulted in poor handling and a less than stellar driving experience. The lack of power steering and temperamental brakes only added to the Fiero's woes. Despite its innovative styling and mid-engine layout, the Pontiac Fiero struggled to shake off its bad rap. It was a classic case of a car that promised the world but delivered disappointment. excitement. But the Fiero wasn't the only 80s car that left consumers scratching their heads. Another automotive oddity was the AMC Pacer, a vehicle that boldly went where no car had gone before, for better or worse. Remember the AMC Pacer? This automotive oddball from the 70s had grand ambitions but fell short in execution. AMC envisioned the Pacer as a game changer, a compact car that would leave rivals like the Chevy Vega and Ford Pinto in the dust. But when plans for a fuel-efficient Wankel rotary engine fizzled out, the Pacer was stuck with a thirsty inline-six that guzzled more gas than its competitors. The Pacer's unconventional wide, bubble-like design prioritized passenger comfort and safety, but its poor aerodynamics and hefty weight dragged down performance. Even that longer right side door for easier backseat access couldn't make up for the Pacer's impracticality. Quality issues and lackluster performance quickly tarnished its reputation, and sales nosedived. By 1980, fewer than 10,000 Pacers found homes annually. Despite its failings, the AMC Pacer remains an iconic part of automotive history, immortalized in pop culture by appearances in movies like Wayne's World. Love it or hate it, this quirky car was undeniably memorable, but the 80s had no shortage of automotive misfits. Another eco-warrior that missed the mark was the pint-sized city car, a plucky electric vehicle with big dreams but limited range. Komoda Car City Car. Remember the pint-sized city car? That plucky electric vehicle from the 80s with big dreams but limited range. This tiny two-seater was the brainchild of Sebring Vanguard, who hoped to cash in on the eco-friendly car craze. But the city car's good intentions couldn't make up for its shortcomings. With a top speed of just 28 miles per hour and a range of only 35 miles per charge, even less with hills or cold weather, the city car was more suited for puttering around the neighborhood than tackling the daily commute. And let's not forget the safety concerns. The city car's shoebox-like design might have been eye-catching, but it left much to be desired in terms of crash protection. Despite upgrades like real doors instead of flimsy plastic curtains, the city car struggled to shake off its reputation as a flimsy death trap on wheels. It's no wonder that consumers ultimately gave this pint-sized pioneer a hard pass, but the 80s had no shortage of automotive letdowns. Across the pond, another car was gearing up to disappoint, the Citroen Visa. Across the pond, the Citroen Visa was gearing up to disappoint. Launched in 1978 with much fanfare, this French compact car aimed to replace the aging AMI and win over European drivers. But the Visa's quirky styling and lackluster performance left consumers scratching their heads. The dashboard's unique design might have been typically Citroen, but it couldn't distract from the car's flaws. Even a 1981 redesign couldn't boost the Visa's popularity enough to meet expectations. Innovative features like the convertible roof options on some models were overshadowed by the car's struggles with reliability and performance. Sporty variants like the Visa GTI and the Group B Racer Trophy tried to inject some excitement, but they couldn't change the overall perception of the Visa as a letdown. Today, spotting a Citroen Visa on the roads is about as likely as finding a four-leaf clover, especially in the UK. But the 80s still had a few more automotive mishaps in store, like a luxury brand's ill-fated attempt to go mainstream. Cadillac Cimarron. Speaking of missteps, the Cadillac Cimarron stands as a cautionary tale of brand mismanagement. This compact car, introduced in 1982, was meant to be Cadillac's entry into the small luxury vehicle market. But beneath the Cimarron's Cadillac badging lurked a dirty secret. It was little more than a gussied-up Chevrolet Cavalier. The Cimarron shared its humble underpinnings with other GM economy cars, yet Cadillac had the audacity to charge a premium price for this wolf in sheep's clothing. Consumers quickly saw through the charade, and the Cimarron became a laughingstock. Its lackluster performance, uninspired design, and obvious cost-cutting measures tarnished Cadillac's once prestigious reputation. Despite a few rare bright spots, like the occasional manual transmission option, the Cimarron never managed to shake off its image as a lazy rebadged job. Today, it serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of diluting a brand's identity in pursuit of short-term gains. But the 80s had one more automotive icon up its sleeve, a car that would become more famous for its time on the silver screen than its time on the road. The 1981 DeLorean DMC-12, a sports car that became a cultural phenomenon, even though it never quite lived up to its promises on the road. This stainless steel beauty with its iconic gull-wing doors captured the imagination of a generation. But behind the scenes, the DeLorean was plagued by production delays and quality control issues that would ultimately lead to its downfall. Powered by a modest 130 horsepower V6 engine, the DMC-12 couldn't keep up with its sportier rivals. The heavy steering made it a handful to drive, and the interior quality left much to be desired. John DeLorean's legal troubles only added to the car's woes, tarnishing its reputation and leading to the end of production after just 2 years. But the DeLorean story didn't end there. In 1985, it gained a new lease on life thanks to a starring role in the blockbuster film Back to the Future. As Doc Brown's time machine of choice, the DMC-12 became an instant icon, cementing its place in pop culture history. As we reach the end, let's raise a glass to the worst cars of the 80s. The ones that dared to be different, even if they didn't always succeed. They may have been flawed, but they were also unforgettable, and that's what makes them true icons of their time. Be sure to check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating journeys through car history. The 1980s were a golden era for cars, packed with bold designs and features that made driving unforgettable. In this video, we'll explore 20 forgotten car features from the 1980s we want back. From pop-up headlights to cassette decks, these features defined the decade. How many of them do you remember? Let's dive in. Pop-up headlights. Do you remember the magic of pop-up headlights? These sleek, retractable lights weren't just functional, they were a statement. Whether it was a Pontiac Firebird, a Mazda RX-7, or a Chevrolet Corvette, the unmistakable charm of these hidden eyes gave 80s cars an unmatched personality. Pop-up headlights weren't just a design choice, they embodied the futuristic vibes of the era. There was something undeniably cool about the way they flipped open, as if the car was winking at you. Beyond their aesthetic appeal, they also served a practical purpose. Hiding the headlights streamlined the car's design, reducing drag and enhancing its sporty look. However, they weren't perfect. Pop-up headlights required motors to raise and lower the lights, and these mechanisms could fail over time, leaving one headlight awkwardly stuck in place. As safety regulations evolved and pedestrian protection became a priority, pop-up headlights became impractical for modern designs. But for car enthusiasts, pop-up headlights remain a symbol of an era when cars dared to be bold, playful, and full of personality. Their absence in today's automotive world leaves us longing for a time when vehicles felt alive and uniquely expressive. T-tops. Nothing screamed cool in the 1980s quite like T-tops. These removable roof panels were the perfect blend of a hardtop security and a convertible's open-air thrill. Popularized by cars like the Pontiac Trans Am and the Chevrolet Camaro, T-tops became synonymous with freedom and style. Removing the panels was easy and fun, transforming your car into an instant head-turner. Cruising down the highway with the wind rushing in through the T-tops made every drive feel like a scene from an 80s action movie. They also had a certain practicality, providing an open-air experience without sacrificing the rigidity of a full roof, which was important for performance cars. Of course, T-tops weren't without their quirks. They could be prone to leaks during rainstorms, and storing the panels in the trunk could take up valuable space. Still, their unique design made them unforgettable, and their disappearance from modern cars feels like a loss for anyone who values both style and nostalgia. Velour upholstery. Picture this, sliding into the driver's seat and being greeted by the soft, plush comfort of velour upholstery. In the 1980s, velour wasn't just a fabric, it was a statement of luxury and coziness that made every car feel like your living room on wheels. Unlike today's slick leather or minimalist cloth seats, velour offered a warm, inviting texture that felt premium without being overly formal. Its bold, vibrant colors, often paired with funky patterns, added personality to car interiors, making every ride a visual and tactile experience. Velour was especially popular in family sedans and luxury vehicles, appealing to drivers who wanted both comfort and style. It was durable too, standing up to wear and tear better than you might think. But as the 90s rolled in, automotive trends shifted towards sleeker, more understated materials, leaving velour behind. Even so, for those who experienced it, velour remains a nostalgic reminder of an era when cars weren't just about function. They were about making you feel at home, even on the road. Digital dashboards. In the 1980s, digital dashboards felt like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Instead of traditional dials and gauges, these glowing panels used LED or LCD displays to present speed, fuel levels, and other vital stats. They turned ordinary cars into futuristic rides that felt like they belonged in Knight Rider. Cars like the Buick Riata, Dodge Daytona, and even the Cadillac Eldorado embraced this high-tech trend, wowing drivers with displays that looked like they were plucked from a spaceship. Animated graphics, digital speedometers, and even voice alerts added to the excitement, making the driving experience feel cutting edge. But digital dashboards weren't just about aesthetics. They offered improved readability and allowed for more data to be presented in creative ways. Unfortunately, the technology of the time wasn't always reliable. Screens could fade, pixels might burn out, and repairing these systems was often expensive. Today, modern cars use digital displays in a completely different way, but the charm of those early 80s dashboards lives on as a symbol of a decade when innovation and imagination went hand in hand. Manual window cranks. Do you remember the satisfying simplicity of rolling down your window with a manual crank? Before power windows became standard, these little cranks were a staple in every car. They were functional, reliable, and added a tactile experience to the act of driving. Manual window cranks were incredibly straightforward. You didn't need electronics or motors, just a quick twist of the wrist, and your window was down. They were perfect for times when you needed ventilation or just wanted to interact with the world outside your car. One of their biggest advantages? They rarely broke. Unlike power windows, which rely on motors and switches that could fail, manual cranks were virtually foolproof. Even if something did go wrong, repairs were simple and cheap. As power windows took over in the late 80s and 90s, manual cranks began to disappear. While power windows are undeniably convenient, there's something nostalgic about the physical connection manual cranks gave us to our cars. They remind us of a time when simplicity and functionality were valued just as much as innovation. Cassette decks with equalizers. Remember cruising down the road with your favorite mixtape playing, adjusting the sound to perfection on the car's built-in equalizer? In the 1980s, cassette decks were more than just music players. They were the heart of your car's audio system. Paired with manual equalizers, they gave drivers control over bass, treble, and balance, ensuring every track sounded just right. Cassette decks were an essential part of car culture in the 80s. Whether you were blasting rock anthems or smooth ballads, the tactile experience of inserting a cassette and hearing that satisfying click was a ritual. Equalizers elevated the experience, letting you fine-tune the sound to suit your mood or the song. While CDs and digital audio eventually replaced cassettes, there's a distinct charm in the nostalgia of analog sound. Cassette decks and equalizers weren't just functional, they were a part of the driving experience that made every trip memorable. Retractable antennas. There was something undeniably cool about watching your car's antenna rise and retract at the push of a button. Retractable antennas were a small but sophisticated touch that added a sense of luxury to 1980s vehicles. Found in cars like the Toyota Supra and Mercedes-Benz models, they were a feature that combined practicality with style. These antennas weren't just for show, they served a functional purpose, improving radio reception without permanently protruding from the car's exterior. When not in use, they tucked away neatly, preserving the sleek design of the vehicle and avoiding damage from weather or car washes. While modern cars integrate antennas into windows or roof fins, the charm of a retractable antenna remains unmatched. It was a small detail that made cars feel dynamic and interactive, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who drove with one. Automatic seatbelts. Love them or hate them, automatic seatbelts were a quirky hallmark of 1980s automotive safety. Designed to comply with new safety regulations, these belts moved along a track to secure passengers automatically when the car door closed. While they could be finicky, they were undeniably futuristic at the time. Cars like the Toyota Camry and Ford Escort featured this innovative system, making seatbelt use unavoidable, whether passengers liked it or not. While some found them convenient, others found the constant movement intrusive, and the belts were often unreliable, occasionally failing to lock properly. Despite their short-lived popularity, automatic seatbelts remain a memorable innovation that symbolized a decade of creative automotive experimentation. Ashtrays and cigarette lighters. In the 1980s, ashtrays and cigarette lighters weren't just standard, they were essential features in every car. Smoking was far more common then, and these built-in conveniences catered to the needs of drivers and passengers alike. Ashtrays were often placed in easy-to-reach locations, like the center console or rear doors, complete with stylish designs that blended seamlessly with the car's interior. Cigarette lighters, meanwhile, doubled as power sources for early car gadgets like portable fans and CB radios. As smoking rates declined and health awareness grew, these features disappeared from car designs. While their absence makes sense in today's cars, they remain a nostalgic reminder of a time when vehicles catered to an entirely different set of habits. Car phones. If you had a car phone in the 1980s, you were the epitome of success. car phones were the ultimate status symbol, showcasing wealth and technological sophistication. Installed in luxury cars like Mercedes-Benz and Cadillac models, they offered a glimpse into a future where staying connected on the go was possible. Car phones were bulky and expensive, often requiring large receivers mounted in the console or between the seats. Despite their limitations, they were a game changer for professionals who needed to stay reachable while driving. The sight of someone talking on a car phone was enough to turn heads and inspire envy. While mobile phones eventually replaced them, car phones symbolized the bold innovation of the 80s, when technology in cars felt futuristic and extravagant. Built-in compass. Do you remember when having a compass built into your car felt like cutting-edge technology? In the 1980s, these small but handy tools became a common feature in many vehicles, helping drivers navigate in an era before GPS. Often integrated into the dashboard or rearview mirror, they were a simple yet effective way to orient yourself on long road trips or unfamiliar highways. Built-in compasses weren't just practical, they added a sense of adventure to driving. Seeing the direction displayed as you cruised down the road made you feel like an explorer charting a course. Whether heading north for a weekend getaway or east for the holidays, the compass provided reassurance and a touch of sophistication to your vehicle's interior. While GPS and digital navigation have made traditional compasses obsolete, there's a certain nostalgia in their simplicity. They remind us of a time when driving required a bit more intuition and a sense of direction was a valued skill. Turbo boost gauges. For car enthusiasts in the 1980s, turbo boost gauges were the epitome of cool. Found in performance cars like the Ford Mustang SVO or the Saab 900 Turbo, these gauges displayed how much extra power the turbocharger was delivering. Watching the needle rise as you pressed the accelerator was an exhilarating experience, making you feel connected to the raw power of your engine. Turbochargers were a relatively new innovation for consumer cars in the 80s, and the boost gauge wasn't just a functional tool, it was a statement. It signaled that you were driving something special, a machine built for speed and excitement. Today, turbochargers are more common, but the standalone boost gauge has largely disappeared, replaced by integrated digital systems. For those who remember the thrill of seeing that needle climb, turbo boost gauges remain a cherished relic of 80s automotive enthusiasm. Pop-out rear windows. If you owned a compact car in the 1980s, chances are you enjoyed the practicality of pop-out rear windows. These small hinged windows could be manually opened to provide fresh air without fully rolling down the main windows. They were a simple yet ingenious solution for ventilation, especially in two-door cars where rear passengers didn't have their own windows to operate. Popular in cars like the Volkswagen Rabbit and Honda Civic, pop-out rear windows were a favorite among families and commuters alike. They allowed airflow on warm days without creating the wind tunnel effect of fully open windows. Although they've largely disappeared in modern designs, pop-out rear windows had a charm all their own. They were practical, easy to use, and added a unique touch to compact car designs of the era. Colorful pinstriping. In the 1980s, a car's paint job wasn't complete without some stylish pinstriping. Whether it was a bold stripe down the sides or intricate patterns accentuating the hood, colorful pinstriping added personality to every vehicle. It was a way to stand out on the road and make your car uniquely yours. Pinstriping wasn't just about aesthetics, it also reflected the trends of the time. Bright colors and bold lines were synonymous with the flashy, expressive style of the 80s. Car manufacturers often offered factory pinstriping, but aftermarket customizations were also wildly popular, allowing drivers to showcase their creativity. Today, pinstriping has mostly faded away, replaced by more minimalist designs. But for those who remember the joy of adding a splash of color to their ride, it remains a fond memory of a time when cars were as unique as their drivers. Flip-up sunroofs. Before panoramic glass roofs became the norm, flip-up sunroofs were the go-to option for enjoying the sun and fresh air while driving. These manually operated sunroofs could be tilted up or fully removed, offering a flexible way to bring the outdoors into your car. Flip-up sunroofs were especially popular in compact cars like the Toyota Corolla and Volkswagen Golf. They were easy to use, affordable, and didn't require the complex mechanisms of modern electric sunroofs. The simplicity of flipping it open for a little extra ventilation or popping it out entirely for a sunny day cruise made them a favorite among drivers in the 80s. While modern sunroofs offer more convenience, they lack the hands-on charm of flip-up designs. For many, these sunroofs represent a time when cars were about simple pleasures and enjoying the journey just as much as the destination. Wood grain dash panels. In the 1980s, nothing said classy quite like a wood grain dash panel. Whether it was genuine wood veneer or a convincing imitation, this design choice added a touch of sophistication to car interiors. Found in luxury models like Cadillacs and Lincolns, as well as family station wagons, wood grain dashes evoked the feel of a high-end living room on wheels. The appeal wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about creating an experience. Sitting behind a wood grain dash felt luxurious, as if the car was an extension of refined taste. Paired with plush velour seats and analog clocks, it transformed the driving experience into something more elevated and personal. As the 90s ushered in sleeker, more minimalist designs, wood grain interiors became a relic of the past. Still, for those who remember them, they symbolize an era when cars prioritized comfort and elegance over pure functionality. Voice warning systems.
Please close your passenger door. Please close your driver door.
Your door is ajar. If you drove certain 1980s cars, you might remember being greeted by a robotic voice warning system. Found in models like the Chrysler New Yorker and the Datsun Maxima, these systems were an early attempt at integrating technology into vehicles, adding a futuristic touch to everyday driving. These voice systems delivered alerts about everything from low fuel to unfastened seatbelts. At the time, they felt like a leap into the future, offering a more interactive driving experience. Drivers appreciated the novelty, even if the voice sometimes bordered on annoying. While modern cars have replaced these robotic warnings with visual alerts and smartphone integration, the charm of a monotone voice delivering safety messages remains a quirky memory of 80s automotive innovation. Hidden fuel caps. The 1980s loved clever design touches, and hidden fuel caps were one of the most ingenious features of the era. Concealed behind taillights, emblems, or panels, these fuel caps added a sense of sleekness and surprise to vehicles. Models like the Chevrolet Camaro and Cadillac Eldorado embraced this design, offering a clean, streamlined look. Hidden fuel caps weren't just about aesthetics, they also protected the fuel tank from dirt and debris. There was something satisfying about flipping open a taillight to reveal the cap, making a mundane task like refueling feel a little cooler. Though practicality eventually phased them out, hidden fuel caps are fondly remembered by car enthusiasts who missed the days when even the smallest details were designed to impress. Boxy designs. The cars of the 1980s were unapologetically boxy. From the Volvo 240 to the Ford Bronco, sharp angles and straight lines defined the decade's automotive aesthetic. These designs weren't just about looks, they prioritized functionality, maximizing interior space and providing better visibility for drivers. Boxy cars had a sense of durability and presence that's often lacking in today's aerodynamic designs. They were easy to work on, with straightforward body panels that could be repaired or customized without hassle. Their shapes also gave them a unique personality, making them instantly recognizable on the road. Though modern cars have embraced curves and sleek silhouettes, the bold simplicity of boxy designs remains a nostalgic favorite for those who grew up riding in these sturdy, angular vehicles. Full-size spare tires. Remember when spare tires weren't just tiny emergency replacements but full-sized, ready-to-go backups? In the 1980s, full-size spares were a standard feature in most cars, offering drivers peace of mind and the convenience of a fully functional replacement tire. These spares were often tucked neatly into the trunk, sometimes under a stylish cover. They weren't just practical, they added a sense of preparedness and reliability to the driving experience. If you had a flat, you didn't have to limp to the nearest repair shop. You could drive confidently on your spare as though nothing had happened. As car manufacturers began prioritizing trunk space and weight savings, full-size spares gave way to smaller temporary donut tires. While the change made sense logistically, it marked the end of an era when cars came equipped for any emergency, no matter how big or small. These forgotten car features from the 1980s take us back to a time when vehicles were as bold and unique as the decade itself. From pop-up headlights to cassette decks, they brought personality and innovation to our driving experiences. Which of these features do you miss the most? Let us know in the comments below. In this video, we're taking a nostalgic ride through 10 old car features that flopped spectacularly. We'll kick things off with the vent windows, those charming little triangles that promised a cool breeze, and end with the quirky curb feelers that kept your white walls pristine. Along the way, we'll reminisce about the days of bench seats, marvel at the novelty of push-button transmissions, and chuckle at the practicality, or lack thereof, of T-tops and automatic seatbelts. So buckle up, literally, if you remember those swivel seats. But before we rev our engines into the past, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Trust me, it'll be a ride to remember. Vent windows. Ah, Vent windows, the little triangular windows that were the hallmark of many classic cars. If you've ever had the pleasure of riding in a vintage vehicle, you might remember these quirky features. They were like the Swiss Army knife of car windows, offering a multitude of functions that, in hindsight, weren't exactly groundbreaking. Vent windows, or quarter windows as they're sometimes called, were designed to let in fresh air without the need to roll down the main window. This was especially handy before the widespread use of air conditioning in cars. Instead of having to deal with the gale force winds of a fully open window, you could simply angle the vent window to direct a gentle breeze into the cabin. It was like having nature's air conditioner, just without the temperature control. One of the less glamorous, yet oddly nostalgic uses of vent windows was as a makeshift ashtray for smokers. You could crack open the vent window just enough to flick ashes out without creating a tornado inside the car. Talk about multitasking, keeping the car cool and ash-free. Despite their practical uses, vent windows slowly fell out of favor. The rise of air conditioning in cars meant less need for auxiliary ventilation. Plus, they were a security risk. A skilled thief could easily pop open a vent window to unlock the car door. Not exactly what you'd call a feature, more like an invitation. Curiously, vent windows had a sort of renaissance in the world of car enthusiasts. For those restoring classic cars, finding a vent window in good condition can be a treasure hunt. Bench seats. Remember the good old days when you could slide right over to the middle of the car seat to snuggle up with your sweetheart while cruising down Main Street? These all-encompassing front seats were a staple in many classic cars, designed to fit 3 people across like a cozy couch on wheels. Bench seats were the epitome of automotive luxury and convenience. Back in the day, they provided ample seating for an entire family or a group of friends, with no pesky center console getting in the way. This made them perfect for romantic drives, or for cramming in an extra friend when your car was the designated party mobile. Of course, bench seats weren't just about seating capacity. They had a certain nostalgic charm that modern bucket seats just can't match. Remember when you'd scoot over to the driver's side to impress a date, or when your mom or dad would effortlessly slide across to get out on the curbside to avoid traffic? These were the days when driving felt like a communal activity, with everyone in the front row sharing the experience. However, like many features on our list, bench seats eventually fell out of favor. Safety regulations and the advent of center consoles, with their convenient cup holders and storage compartments, made the bench seat seem a bit outdated. And let's not forget the introduction of seat belts, which were easier to manage with bucket seats. It turns out, sliding across a bench seat wasn't so great when it meant untangling a mess of seat belts every time you got in and out of the car. Despite their decline, bench seats have a special place in the hearts of car enthusiasts. They're a symbol of a bygone era when cars were as much about style and personality as they were about practicality. In fact, some modern vehicles have tried to bring back the bench seat feel with split bench designs, but it's just not the same as that uninterrupted stretch of cushion. One fun fact about bench seats: they were a favorite for drive-in movie theaters. You could cuddle up with your date or sprawl out with a group of friends, turning your car into the perfect cinema experience. Try doing that in a modern car with bucket seats and a giant center console in the way. Column shifters. If you've ever been in an older car and wondered what that lever sticking out from the steering column was, congratulations, you've encountered a column shifter. These curious contraptions were once a common sight, acting as the gear selector for automatic and manual transmissions alike. Column shifters had their heyday from the 1940s through the 1970s, and they were the epitome of automotive innovation and design efficiency. The idea was simple: by mounting the shifter on the steering column, car manufacturers could free up precious real estate on the floor, making way for that beloved bench seat we just talked about. Imagine a time when front seats could transform into a pseudo sofa, perfect for cruising and canoodling with no gear stick poking into your romantic plans. Operating a column shifter required a bit of a learning curve. You'd push or pull the lever, often through a series of clicks, to change gears. For those who mastered it, the motion became second nature, a bit like a secret handshake among vintage car enthusiasts. And let's not forget the added bonus of being able to shift gears while keeping your other hand comfortably around your date. Despite their charm, column shifters gradually fell out of favor. As car designs evolved, so did preferences for more ergonomic and driver-focused interiors. Floor-mounted shifters became the norm, offering a more intuitive and sporty driving experience. Plus, advancements in automatic transmission technology made the need for a column shifter less relevant. But there's a certain nostalgia attached to the column shifter. It harkens back to a time when cars had a unique personality, each feature telling a story. story. In fact, some car manufacturers have attempted to revive the column shifter in modern vehicles as a nod to their classic roots. Trucks in particular have held onto the column shifter for its practicality and space-saving benefits. A fun fact about column shifters: they were sometimes referred to as 3 on the tree for 3-speed manuals or 4 on the floor for their floor-mounted counterparts. This colorful terminology has become a part of car culture, a testament to how deeply these features have embedded themselves in the collective memory of car enthusiasts. Fender-mounted mirrors. Now let's travel back to the golden era of automobiles, when fender-mounted mirrors were the epitome of style and sophistication. These external mirrors, perched elegantly on the front fenders of cars, were a distinctive feature that set classic cars apart from their modern counterparts. Fender-mounted mirrors were more than just a fashion statement. They were designed to give drivers a better field of view. Placed further forward on the fenders, they provided a wide-angle perspective, reducing blind spots and offering a panoramic view of the road behind. In theory, this sounds fantastic, right? Better visibility and enhanced safety. Sign us up. However, in practice, fender-mounted mirrors came with their own set of quirks. Adjusting these mirrors required the dexterity of a contortionist or the patience to pull over, get out, and manually tweak them until they were just right. Not exactly convenient, especially if you were in a hurry or in the middle of traffic. And let's not forget the aesthetic challenge. They often made the car look like it had tiny antlers. Despite these inconveniences, fender-mounted mirrors hold a special place in automotive history. They were a hallmark of elegance and sophistication, often seen on luxury models and sports cars. They also added a unique character to the car's design, making each vehicle instantly recognizable. One curious tidbit about fender-mounted mirrors: they became popular in Japan well into the 1980s, long after they had fallen out of favor in other parts of the world. Japanese manufacturers believed that the mirror's forward placement provided superior visibility, especially in the tight confines of urban driving. This led to some models sporting these mirrors long after they disappeared from Western markets. Fender-mounted mirrors also made frequent appearances in Hollywood. Classic films often featured sleek cars with these stylish mirrors, adding to the glamour and allure of the vehicles on screen. They were synonymous with the charm and elegance of a bygone era when driving was as much about making an impression as it was about getting to your destination. As technology advanced, side mirrors migrated to the doors, offering easier adjustments and better aerodynamics. Modern cars benefit from heated mirrors, power adjustments, and even blind spot detection systems, making the quaint fender-mounted mirror seem like a relic from another time. But for car enthusiasts and collectors, these mirrors are a cherished reminder of the artistry and individuality that defined classic car design. 8-track players. The 8-track player, a groovy blast from the past that promised to revolutionize in-car entertainment. If you were cruising down the highway in the late 60s or 70s, chances are you had an 8-track tape blasting your favorite tunes. These chunky cartridges were the precursors to cassettes and CDs, and they brought the magic of music on the road in a way that was nothing short of revolutionary. 8-track players were introduced in the 1960s and quickly became a must-have feature in cars. The idea was simple: an endless loop of magnetic tape divided into 8 tracks, each containing a set of songs. You could switch between tracks with a satisfying click, and the music would play continuously, without the need to flip the tape. It was like having a jukebox right in your dashboard. For a while, 8 tracks were the pinnacle of automotive audio technology. They offered a level of convenience and quality that vinyl records simply couldn't match, especially in the bumpy, jostling environment of a car. Road trips became soundtracked adventures, with the latest hits from bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Fleetwood Mac filling the cabin. However, despite their initial popularity, 8-track players had some serious drawbacks. The tapes were notorious for their fragility, prone to jamming, tangling, and even melting in the summer heat. There was also the peculiar habit of songs abruptly changing tracks in the middle, leading to an awkward silence or a sudden musical jump. Nothing quite like a dramatic pause in the middle of your favorite chorus to keep you on your toes. Moreover, 8 tracks were bulky and took up a lot of space, both in the car and in storage. Carrying around a collection of these tapes was like lugging a small suitcase, a far cry from today's compact digital libraries. As technology advanced, 8 tracks were swiftly overtaken by cassette tapes, which were smaller, more reliable, and offered better sound quality. Despite their fall from grace, 8-track players have a dedicated fan base among vintage car enthusiasts. They evoke a sense of nostalgia, a reminder of a time when car music systems were just beginning to come into their own. Collectors and restorers often go to great lengths to find functioning 8-track players and tapes, relishing the retro vibe they bring to classic cars. One interesting tidbit, some 8-track players featured a program button that allowed you to switch between the 4 programs on the tape, effectively giving you more control over your listening experience. This was a precursor to the shuffle and skip functions we take for granted today. Automatic seatbelts. Automatic seatbelts, one of the automotive industry's bold attempts to merge safety with convenience. If you ever rode in a car from the late 80s or early 90s, you might remember these peculiar contraptions. Designed to ensure that drivers and passengers always buckled up, automatic seatbelts seemed like a clever solution to a serious problem. But as with many innovative ideas, the execution was a bit of a mixed bag. The concept behind automatic seatbelts was simple. As soon as you sat down and closed the car door, the seatbelt would automatically glide into place, securing you without any effort on your part. It was like having a robotic butler who was very concerned about your safety. These systems typically featured a motorized shoulder belt that moved along a track mounted on the door frame or windowsill, while a separate lap belt still had to be fastened manually. In theory, automatic seatbelts were brilliant. They ensured that even the most forgetful or rebellious drivers and passengers would be safely strapped in. This was particularly important during a time when seatbelt usage was not as universally accepted as it is today. By making seatbelt usage unavoidable, manufacturers hoped to reduce injuries and save lives. However, the reality of automatic seatbelts was less than perfect. For starters, the systems could be surprisingly intrusive. Many drivers found the belts awkward and uncomfortable as they slid into place, sometimes catching on clothing or pinching skin. The novelty of being strapped in by a machine quickly wore off when faced with these daily annoyances. Another significant issue was that the automatic shoulder belt provided a false sense of security. Because the lap belt still needed to be fastened manually, many people neglected this crucial step, thinking the shoulder belt alone was sufficient. This incomplete usage actually compromised safety rather than enhancing it. Moreover, the mechanisms of automatic seatbelts were prone to malfunction. The motorized tracks could jam or wear out, leaving the belt stuck in awkward positions. Repairing these systems was often costly and complicated, leading to frustration for car owners. Despite their drawbacks, automatic seatbelts were an important step in the evolution of vehicle safety. They highlighted the need for better seatbelt compliance and paved the way for more sophisticated systems. By the mid-1990s, airbags had become a standard feature in cars, and improved seatbelt designs, including pretensioners and force limiters, offered better protection without the hassle of automation. One amusing tidbit, the novelty of automatic seatbelts made them a bit of a pop culture icon. They appeared in movies and TV shows, often as a symbol of futuristic or high-tech cars. It's a nostalgic reminder of a time when the future of driving seemed to be just around the corner, even if it involved a few hiccups along the way. Push-button transmissions. Push-button transmissions, an innovation that felt like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, promised to make shifting gears as easy as pressing a button. Debuting primarily in the 1950s and 60s, this futuristic feature turned the mundane task of gear selection into a space-age experience. Imagine driving your classic car, and instead of a shifter, you're greeted with a sleek panel of buttons. Talk about feeling like George Jetson. The idea behind push-button transmissions was to simplify the driving experience. Traditional gear levers were bulky and required a certain level of mechanical engagement. Push-button systems, on the other hand, replaced the clunky shifter with a series of buttons on the dashboard. Drivers could change gears by simply pressing the appropriate button, one for park, another for drive, and so on. This design not only freed up space, but also aimed to modernize the driving experience. One of the first and most notable adopters of this technology was Chrysler, with its Torque-Flight push-button transmission introduced in 1956. Other manufacturers like Edsel and Mercury soon followed suit, incorporating similar systems into their models. The sleek, button-laden dashboards were a hit with consumers who were eager to embrace the future. However, push-button transmissions weren't without their quirks. One of the main issues was reliability. The mechanical and electrical systems controlling the buttons could be temperamental, leading to instances where cars wouldn't shift properly or at all. Imagine pressing drive and nothing happening. Not exactly the seamless future people were hoping for. Another challenge was the unfamiliarity and confusion it introduced for drivers. Traditional gear levers provided tactile feedback and a sense of mechanical connection that push buttons lacked. The new system required a bit of a learning curve, and in stressful situations like an emergency stop, instinctively reaching for a button instead of a lever proved problematic for some. Despite these issues, push-button transmissions were undeniably cool and added a touch of futuristic flair to the cars that featured them. They were a symbol of innovation and progress during a time when the automotive industry was rapidly evolving. A fun fact, the 1958 Edsel, often remembered for its commercial failure, featured the Teletouch system, which placed the transmission buttons in the center of the steering wheel hub. This unique placement was both its selling point and downfall, as it was prone to malfunction and not as intuitive as initially hoped. By the mid-1960s, most manufacturers had phased out push-button transmissions in favor of more conventional and reliable systems. However, the allure of the push-button never fully disappeared. Modern cars have reintroduced the concept with electronic gear selectors and push-button starts, proving that some ideas are simply ahead of their time. T-tops. T-tops, or T-bar roof panels, were the ultimate blend of hardtop durability and open-air freedom, making them a beloved feature of many sporty cars from the 1970s and 80s. If you ever wanted to feel the wind in your hair without committing to a full convertible, T-tops were the perfect compromise. They offered a unique driving experience that was as much about style as it was about sensation. The design of T-tops involved two removable roof panels that, when taken off, left a solid bar running down the middle of the car's roof, forming a T-shape. This structure provided extra rigidity compared to traditional convertibles, which was particularly appealing for sports cars that needed to maintain their performance and handling characteristics. It was a way to have your cake and eat it too, enjoying the thrill of open-air driving while keeping the structural integrity of a hardtop. Pontiac was one of the first major manufacturers to introduce T-tops on their Firebird in 1976, and the concept quickly caught on. Other brands, including Chevrolet with their Camaro, followed suit. T-tops became synonymous with the muscle car and sporty coupe scene, embodying a sense of freedom and rebellion. However, T-tops weren't without their drawbacks. One of the biggest issues was water leakage. The seals around the removable panels were often less than perfect, leading to a not-so-fun surprise on rainy days. Owners would frequently find themselves with wet seats and damp interiors, turning their sleek sports car into an unintended aquarium. Additionally, removing and storing the panels could be cumbersome. They required a bit of muscle to lift off and a safe place to store them while driving, which wasn't always convenient. Despite these challenges, T-tops held a special place in the hearts of car enthusiasts. They were a defining feature of an era, a symbol of the carefree spirit of the 70s and 80s. The sight of a Firebird or Camaro with its T-tops off, cruising down the highway, evokes a strong sense of nostalgia and coolness that modern cars can rarely match. One interesting tidbit about T-tops is their appearance in pop culture. They became iconic through their presence in TV shows and movies. Think of the black Pontiac Trans Am in Smokey and the Bandit, or the red Ferrari 308 GTS driven by Tom Selleck in Magnum P.I. These cars with their T-tops removed epitomize the cool factor of the time. As car designs evolved and sunroofs and convertibles improved, the popularity of T-tops waned. By the early 2000s, they had mostly disappeared from new car models. However, they remain a cherished feature for collectors and fans of classic cars. Restoring and maintaining T-tops can be a labor of love, but for those who remember their heyday, it's well worth the effort. Swivel seats. Swivel seats, the rotating chairs of the automotive world, were a quirky yet fascinating feature that promised to bring a new level of convenience and comfort to car interiors. Introduced primarily in the 1970s, these seats were designed to make getting in and out of cars easier, especially for drivers and passengers who might struggle with the typical slide and twist motion required by conventional car seats. The concept of swivel seats was as simple as it was innovative. The front seats could rotate, usually up to 90 degrees, allowing you to face the door directly when entering or exiting the vehicle. This was particularly appealing for older adults, people with mobility issues, or anyone who appreciated a touch of futuristic flair in their ride. Imagine arriving at your destination, smoothly rotating your seat, and stepping out with ease, like you were making a grand entrance every time you park. One of the early adopters of swivel seats was General Motors, which offered them in models like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and the Oldsmobile Cutlass. These seats were typically controlled by a lever or a simple push button, making them user-friendly and intuitive. For families, swivel seats added a layer of practicality, making it easier to manage car seats and help children in and out of the car. However, as with many ambitious automotive innovations, swivel seats had their share of challenges. One of the main issues was safety. While the seats were designed to lock in place once the car was in motion, there were concerns about their stability and the potential for malfunction in the event of an accident. Ensuring that the seats remained securely locked during driving required robust mechanisms, which sometimes proved to be problematic. Another drawback was the complexity and cost of the swivel seat mechanism. The additional parts and engineering needed to make the seats rotate smoothly added weight and expense to the cars, which ultimately made them less appealing in a market that was becoming increasingly competitive. Despite these issues, swivel seats remain a beloved feature among car enthusiasts and collectors. They are a nostalgic reminder of a time when automakers were willing to take bold risks and try out innovative ideas to enhance the driving experience. Today, the concept of swivel seats lives on in some modern minivans and luxury vehicles, where rear seats can rotate to create a more social, lounge-like atmosphere. An interesting tidbit about swivel seats: they were not just confined to American cars. European manufacturers, like Saab, experimented with similar concepts. Saab's version even included a seat that could turn to face the rear of the car, creating a mobile office or meeting space. A true testament to the versatile thinking of the time. Curb feelers. Curb feelers, those whimsical, springy metal wires protruding from the fenders of classic cars, were the unsung heroes of parking in the 1950s and 60s. These curious gadgets were designed to help drivers avoid scraping their white wall tires and pristine hubcaps against the unforgiving concrete of curbs. Think of them as the early predecessors to today's parking sensors, albeit with a bit more flair and a touch of humor. The basic idea behind curb feelers was simple. As you approached the curb, the feelers, which were mounted low on the vehicle, would make contact with the concrete first, creating a distinct scraping sound. This audible alert was your cue to stop, sparing your tires and rims from unsightly damage. For many drivers, especially those piloting large, unwieldy cars of the era, curb feelers were a godsend. One of the most charming aspects of curb feelers was their simplicity. There were no electronics, no need for power sources, just a piece of bent metal that did its job reliably. They were usually installed on the passenger side, where drivers had the most difficulty judging distance to the curb, and sometimes even on both sides for added security. Installing curb feelers was an easy aftermarket upgrade, making them accessible to anyone looking to protect their precious wheel. Curb feelers also had a certain aesthetic appeal. They added a touch of personality and a hint of practicality to cars. Seeing a vehicle with these quirky appendages was a sure sign that the owner cared about their car and was keen on preserving its good looks. It was a blend of function and flair that gave cars a unique character. Despite their practicality, curb feelers eventually fell out of favor. Advances in car design, such as improved driver visibility, better mirror placement, and the advent of power steering, made parking less of a challenge. As cars became more compact and easier to maneuver, the need for curb feelers diminished. Moreover, the rise of modern technology, including ultrasonic parking sensors and rear-view cameras, rendered these mechanical feelers obsolete. However, curb feelers remain a beloved feature among classic car enthusiasts. They evoke a sense of nostalgia for a time when driving required a bit more skill and awareness. For those restoring vintage vehicles, adding curb feelers can be the perfect finishing touch, a nod to the practical ingenuity of the past. An interesting tidbit about curb feelers: they weren't just limited to cars. They found their way onto bicycles and motorcycles, helping riders avoid damaging their wheels and frames. This cross-vehicle application highlights their versatile appeal and practical value.